And we are live. Actually, are we live? Yeah, setting up your meeting for live. It says live.
Mm.
um, Hi, everybody at the What's on an Elephant and Castle Facebook page. I am Nick from Retribe, and joining me today is Matthew Ilevbare,
I
right?
do, yeah.
No, it's not like that'll do. I've got to get it right. Can you pronounce your
It's
name, please?
Ilevbare. Ilevbare.
Ilevbare.
Yeah.
Ilevbare. Thank you, Matthew, for joining me today. You're
No problem.
you're
Happy
a,
to
a
be
young aspiring actor and videographer, and just a general interesting guy. I'm really looking forward to chatting with you for the next 45 minutes or so. I love meeting cool, interesting people. And just on this little talk now, just before you were talking about your interest in history, so maybe we can
Yep.
get into a bit of that too. But can you
Mhm.
please introduce yourself and tell everybody, who you are and what you do?
Okay. Well, as I was introduced, I'm Matthew Ilevbare. I'm a writer, aspiring actor, videographer. Some people call me an artist, but that's up for debate. I do as many things as I can get my hand onto, and I enjoy creativity in most forms. I like to meet new people, network with creatives, and get as much done as I can in as little an amount of time as possible. So yeah, that's pretty much who I am. I'm 27 now, and yeah.
You're a little bit modest, which is always good, but I like that. You're at 27 years old, Matthew, to find the journey that you're on now. What was that like, and when did you discover, your interest in acting and video and arts and those things? I know we kind of always tend to have an interest in, but when did it really start to spark a fire in your belly?
That's a very interesting question because I think the fire was sparked on more than one occasion for me. Um, when I was a lot younger, when I was around the age of 15, I was writing anyway. But over time, things got in the way. I had to go to university eventually. And
Mm.
I never really put myself forward for the things I wanted to do. So writing was always of interest to me. And I decided pretty much in 2020, during the lockdowns, I decided that I needed to pursue it to the best of my ability. So that's when I really got the fire in my stomach for my current kind of trajectory. So I think yeah, around about 2020 was when I decided that writing was the one thing I knew I could do, and I knew I could enjoy doing it while I did it. So I thought this is this is how I want to live the rest of my life by getting into creativity. And along the line, some family members actually told me that I should try acting as well because they felt not that I was too dramatic, but that some of the ways I could get my point across, I would, well, let's just call it dramatic. So I was
Mhm.
slightly more dramatic than most people. So they thought, okay, you should get into acting. And I decided in actually late 2021, around December, to apply for an acting school. Did the audition. That went not as well as I hoped it would, but good news came back and they put me on the course and I've been on it since. I've actually got a class later on today. And yeah, I enjoy it. It's quite entertaining. I'm getting everything that I need sorted out pretty much this month, actually. Everything I need to start getting jobs, looking for my agent and all sorts. So acting was also on the list of things I wanted to do. Videography, interestingly enough, was as a result of networking because I felt it was important as a creative to network with other creatives, especially if you haven't got a group of people around you that you can rely on for, say, because sometimes we need others to push us and encourage us to keep doing what we're doing. So I thought best way to find people is to go out and network. So I've been doing all sorts using apps, going out to events, meeting people in person, and I ended up meeting someone who wanted to shoot a music video. I have never done any videography before this point, by the way, and I was unstable on my feet due to an illness. So I was very interested to do because I was shaking with the camera, but it actually helped what we were trying to accomplish. So eventually ended up with a fairly decent music video on our hands. And that was how I got into videography. So I did that for free, interestingly enough, just to get some experience. I thought that was important, so I felt why not do that? So I did that for free, and now apparently I'm an amateur videographer. So that was fun. As when it comes to art itself, I found that when I have my ideas for things I intend to write, chapters or scenes that I want to write, usually they come disjointed. They're not in any particular order. But I know I can see in my mind's eye what I want to happen. So I decided to start making my own concept art. As a result, I would put together PNGs, I'd use all sorts of filters, I'd draw some stuff, create my own shapes and designs. Then the next thing I know, I was actually producing fairly decent concept art by everyone else's account at least. So I started uploading that, and it became a thing that I do when I feel that the writing itself isn't going too well, or when I feel pressured with life in general, I'm stressed out, I just go straight to creating some art. And when I do that, more ideas come flowing through. So it complements the writing, even though it came from the writing, it kind of makes the writing more enjoyable for me because I can actually see the scenes that I intend to write before I write them. So that was fun for me. But yeah, um, I'd say 2020 was the year when I really decided that creativity is where I need to be, is what I need to do. And I've been pursuing that ever since.
It's really interesting. I since then too, that around that time, I've had a few friends and acquaintances that they say that the acting bug has got them, or painting or writing. There's something that I don't know. Maybe the universe is just kind of sparking that that inner, like I said, that inner spark in a lot of people just to be able to create. And I think it's such an important thing, and we can get into that. But I noticed that at the beginning of this, you said that university got in the way.
Yeah.
It's there's a couple of things that we can talk about there. But where did you end up going to university? What did you study?
I studied at first at Leicester University, and I didn't finish there for a whole bunch of reasons, but I eventually came back and I decided with some, I would call it encouragement, to go and finish my degree, which was in politics. So I went to the University of Birkbeck and I finished there in 2020. Funny enough, that's when we graduated during pretty much the height of the lockdowns. So I did my politics degree in two universities, but finally finished in Birkbeck.
Why do you say it got in the way? And like, well, what interested you? How did you get into wanting to study politics at first of all, Leicester?
Well, originally when I was doing my A levels, we had the first year AS when you get your first batch of grades, and I didn't do too well. There were a few issues back then, but I didn't do too well, and I wanted to study law at first, which would probably have been a bad idea in hindsight. But I was encouraged to take history and politics. This is where history comes in.
Mm-hmm.
I was encouraged to study history and politics instead. Um, I always enjoyed history, but I felt that when going into uni, that was more of a decision of I have to go to uni, so this is what I will do at university. I was told that I could use it for anything. It was a very broad subject. It could be applied to any field. And so I went to Leicester to study history and politics. The way in which it got in the way was even back then, I knew that I didn't really want a certain type of life. I didn't want the whole office job or kind of whatever. I wanted to have more control. I didn't want to have people telling me what to do all the time, which I understand is necessary these days. But I felt that what I wanted was more. What I wanted was creativity in essence. And so I dedicated a lot of my time to studying something I wasn't necessarily interested in, which coupled with some other issues, especially because one thing they never warn you about when you're going to university is freshers. Freshers is a fun time, but people forget that what we're dealing with is 18-year-olds that have just been given a whole, if they've received a grant or whatever back then, I don't know if they still do those now, but have been given a bunch of money
Okay.
and a lot of access to alcohol and all other sorts of things. So I developed an alcohol dependency at university, and that kind of, which is why I only graduated. I started university in 2011 or 2012, and I only graduated in 2020. And a big part of the reason for that was because I was addicted to alcohol, and that took up a lot of time, as you'd expect, and it, was damaging to health, mental health as well. So eventually, I, I mean, I managed to overcome that for the most part, and that's how I'm now on the new trajectory that I'm on at the moment. But yeah, so university wasn't necessarily, it's useful, feed yourself and all that, but it wasn't necessarily something I would do if I had the chance to rewrite history, essentially. Yeah.
Thank you for talking about that. We can probably get into that in a little bit. I'm very interested to know the pre-university Matthew. What was it like growing up? And I suppose the pressures that were maybe put upon you to say this is what you need to do to be successful is to Matthew needs to go and study law, or he needs to study politics and stuff. So what were the kind of pre-university years like, and what were the influences that you were getting from family, friends, teachers, the media, about what it's like for a Black man to be seen as successful?
Mhm.
So can you describe what that was like?
Well, I come from, shall we say, conservative African background, and
Mhm.
most most cultures from around that area are quite strict when it comes to education.
Mhm.
So there was always the expectation for children from that background that you must succeed. You must succeed in terms of education. Education is your bread and butter, essentially, which is in many ways true. But there was, for me, education was always a bit tricky because I, for instance, to um I studied here for a while and I studied abroad. So here, when I was here, things, or rather, let me rephrase this. In Nigeria, which is where my family's from, things work a lot differently, and the difference in cultures is very apparent from the outset. As soon as you arrive, you can see how different things work over there, especially for a young child. They're a lot stricter. They want things done the right way, their way, all the time. And for me, especially coming from here, where we had more freedoms, we could choose the things we wanted to do. It was a different experience. It was quite shocking to some degree, but I got used to it. But yeah, there you will realize quite quickly that the expectation is that you pass all exams, you're good at STEM subjects, maths, English,
Mhm.
science, and I wasn't too bad in anything. I was quite successful in terms of education itself, but they were never really my whole interest, even when I was over there, because I was in a boarding school for the last time I went. I was there for, I think, 3 or 4 years. And the emphasis was on, okay, you finish here, you go on to do your A levels or whatever you do back in the country you're from. Then you go on to university. We all wanted, red brick universities, Oxford, Cambridge, and then you go on to be successful. That was the trajectory. That is it. That's all you know. And that's what you aim for.
Mhm.
And for me, we all want to be successful in that way, especially if it means making your family happy and making a lot of money in future. But for me, it was never really about that. I didn't, the way I envisioned myself being successful was never really along those lines.
Mhm.
But at the same time, especially when you have the pressures of family, you have the pressures of society telling you that this is the way to do it, you have to go this way. you tend, especially when you're young, you tend to just go for that course. And that's effectively what I did. There's always been, in this country, if you're a black man, especially if you're from an African background, you will always be told that the pressure is doubly on you. And in many ways, that's true, that you must succeed in this way. You must put in a lot of effort in this way, otherwise you're doomed. And I found it hard to believe that if I did what I wanted to do, I would be doomed to failure. So I always wanted to go my own way. Unfortunately, I only really had the opportunity to do that when I got older. So I think, yeah, with education, before I got to uni, I was quite intelligent, passed most of my exams, was very good at English, which makes sense given that I've always written. I've written since I was a child. I used to just pick up a notebook, write as much as I could. I was known for reading a lot of books. Sometimes people would find me falling asleep or asleep with about 3 books surrounding me at least, because I couldn't read just one. I'd need to read one, put that down, read another. I don't know what that is, but that's just how I was back then. And so that was how I think I started dreaming of becoming a writer myself, through reading and writing when I was a child. Um, yeah, I think mainly education was always something that I did because I was supposed to do that thing. I didn't, it wasn't, of course, you need to pass exams, you need to get your GCSEs, your A levels, but it was never something I was ultimately interested in. I was always interested more in creating something myself, whether that was art or a book or anything, or even a film. I used to be very interested in one day producing a film of my own, which I intend to do eventually. But the the push to succeed in terms of traditional education was always there, and I guess that came to a head when I eventually arrived in university. That was when the true me clashed with that expectation, and obviously led to shenanigans and now where I am today.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that that's really interesting that you point that it's the things that led you to where, you know, you started to your relationship with alcohol changed.
Mm.
And I know in my experience, it was definitely the same thing too. I mean, I grew up in the environment that you need to go to university, you need to get an education, you need to become a teacher or a doctor or a lawyer. Like these are the things that you just knew from the time you were like kind of 8, 9, 10 years old. People were
Mm.
putting this in you. I never really felt like that was inside of me. I like the creative aspect of things, but I wasn't very good at writing because I had problems with my eyes. So I had problems reading and then comprehending word structure. So poetry was really good for me to be able to write because it was kind of just free flowing, and
Mm.
it you know, I didn't have to kind of adhere to literary like English sentence structure and
Mm.
you know, all the laws of the English language.
Mm.
Um, and then Matthew, when I got into my work time, like I never drank because my dad was an alcoholic and I didn't want to be like my dad, so I stayed away from it. But when I went to university, I felt a little bit, I'm imagining like you, like I just didn't belong. I was doing it to appease, you know, I'd gotten married very early. I was doing it to appease my wife and my family, to say, oh, look, Nick's trying to better his career. He's not just going to be an ice hockey player. He's going to be a teacher when he graduates. And I found myself doing things that were not nice, you know, like I was flirting with girls. I was always looking for exterior validation from my friends and the people around me, because I just had these huge fears of failure and not being accepted and being judged. So I ended up, you know, committing adultery, and I ended up doing these very heinous things that later led me to, you know, a career that I felt like a fraud and an imposter, and I didn't belong as a TV presenter. How could I be a TV presenter? And then alcohol came into my life because it was like, oh, took fear away, you
Mm.
know, and all of a sudden, all those fears of being accepted and being judged and not fitting in went away because alcohol relieved that fear. And then I went down a really slippery slope where alcohol took me to the depths of almost dying. But it's interesting that what we look for when we pick up a drink, it isn't really necessarily to get drunk. You
Mm,
know, it's literally just or to feel, you know, it is just to feel some kind of normalcy. And I'm very interested today to know, you know, how parents are raising their children in terms of universities are businesses. They're designed like machines to get people into university. So teachers are targeted at work and on TV and across media. It's like, you know, your kids need to have a degree to succeed, which is still, you know, that's a 50-year-old concept, isn't it?
mhm, mhm.
And I'm so happy that you've found your path and that you're at 27, you're now, you know, doing what you are passionate about, where you feel purpose. But it's also like those years weren't lost. You know, getting a degree isn't a
Mm.
lost thing. And you know, the fact that it took you a little bit longer and that you struggled with your relationship with alcohol only makes your story, gives your story more validation for what you're doing now, because it's like the pull to create was still going to get you on that path
Mhm.
of doing what you're doing now. You just needed to go through all these years of finding that and really knowing that that spark is your true purpose.
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely. I agree. Because one thing I know for sure, especially with the story I'm currently writing, it's a psychological thriller.
Mm,
But a lot of my own experience, I sometimes when people who know me read the manuscript so far, they feel as though I am the main character because he himself is an alcoholic. But I'm not. But what I've done is I've taken experiences I've had and I've poured them into the work itself. So these are experiences I obviously regret now that I'm older, things that I did that I shouldn't have done, spending too much time drinking. It has affected my health. It has caused all sorts of issues. But at the end of the day, when I say regret, I don't mean that they haven't had any kind of a positive influence
mm,
on the way I think. Because now I'm sure I can give people advice, younger people advice on what not to do when they go to university, what to do when they go to university. I can tell them to make sure that they're making the right decision in going to university. And through my writing, I can express certain things that aren't really, even though as a society we seem to be getting better when we're discussing mental health, alcoholism, and things like that. We've decided to move away from viewing it as purely this kind of a choice based
mm.
constant drinking cycle, whatever. We're looking at it as more of a disease, more of a, we're looking at the causes of it rather than just the thing itself. And I think that's good. And I think that through my writing, I can definitely teach people what it's actually like. Because a lot of people, especially young people that I've met anyway, still see alcoholism as something that's enjoyable, unless they see it in its worst forms. They see
Mm.
it, sorry,
It's okay.
they see it as something that they can easily, you know, decide, oh, I'll drink today, I'll drink a lot this week, and everything will be fine. When it's not
Mm.
necessarily the case, and it looks flamboyant, it looks like it makes you feel good, is the problem. This is what people tend not to understand, especially for someone like me. When I arrived at university, I wasn't very talkative, I wasn't very extroverted. And alcohol was a very easy way to be part of the crowd, part of the group. Everyone's doing it, so you drink, and it's fun. Obviously, it's fun. You releases you from any kind of inhibition or fear, as you said. And what people don't understand is that that's a lie, really, because you could easily feel that way if you tried harder a different way. But alcohol is the easiest way to get there. And as a result, you just keep using it, you keep drinking, you keep going. And the funny thing is that for me, by about my second year in university, what I had started drinking for, the ability to talk to people, the ability to go out and be sociable, I wasn't even doing that anymore. I had become recluse, and it was the alcohol that was controlling all of my decision making. So the thing I wanted out of it, I was no longer getting, but I would still drink, is the problem. And people don't tend to realize that it can do that to you, and that's how it takes over a lot of people's lives. And I feel like all of that experience, though now it's obviously has pain related to it, all sorts physical pain related to it, um I wouldn't necessarily change it because it taught me a lot about myself. It taught me a lot about other people. It taught me a lot about my family, who you can rely on, what you should do if you're in a certain situation, who you should talk to, places you should go, other things to do rather than choose the easiest way, which for me was definitely alcohol. And I would definitely say that in my writing would be poorer for it had I not spent the time I spent in university and the time I spent drinking and the time I did all of the things I shouldn't have been doing. I'd make better choices if I had another go around, but I would hope that I'd still maintain the wisdom or the knowledge that I gained from the mistakes I made, for sure.
No, I get that completely, you know, and it's funny that people do have this relationship with alcohol where they see it as being, you know, it's a social lubricant, no
Mm,
question about it. A couple of drinks can really loosen the tongue and it makes people feel more at ease. And for, you know, 90% of the population, that's where it kind of just stays. It's just but for around 10%, it's this thing of, you know, this inability to control the amount that you take once you take it.
mm.
And I mean, that's one side of alcoholism, and that's the other thing too, is that people think that an alcoholic is the, like, I'm in Soho here, and there's the guys out on the park bench in Soho Square. They think that, you know, to be an alcoholic you have to have like no teeth and living on a park bench. And I mean, I'm an alcoholic. I'm sober almost 6 years. I'll always be an alcoholic. And but then there are some other people who are heavy drinkers, you know, and maybe that, I'm not sure what your relationship with it is, but once you start taking a few drinks, you can't control the amount you take. But eventually, you have the power within you to say enough is enough.
Mm.
Whereas a guy like me, I never had that power to say enough is enough, and I was drinking even when I didn't want to. It was all beyond my physical and mental control. I needed to have an intervention of another kind, you know, to stop me. I got that through a 12-step program, but um, you know, we have these prejudice towards alcohol. You know, the people who like you say, like me, people would have said, "Can't you just stop, Nick, for your parents, or can't you stop for your girlfriend? Can't you stop?" And you just can't. And that's the sad part, and that's why, you know, unfortunately a lot of people do die of this illness. And it's you know, I'm a lucky one. You know, there's not a lot of guys, well, there are, but there's many who don't make it. So
Mm.
I think that when I think people need to educate them, they don't need to, but I'm glad that society is saying that and more people are talking about their relationship with alcohol, because as you say, it's this experience that you can use to help others, and you've done that in your writing. And I know you talk about psychological thrillers. What experiences did you have in those dark moments of I suppose of being in the bottle, and how did you
Well,
translate that into your writing?
I mean, one thing I used to do quite often, well, not too often, but far more often than anybody else would around me at the time, is again, yeah, it was about not being able to control how much you take.
Mm-hmm.
So I could start drinking one day, and that was the social day when I was with everyone, and we'd have a few beers, we'd go out, we do whatever, we'd go to a club or whatever we do. But for them, it ends with that. That's the night.
Mm-hmm.
Everything stops there. But for me, it could progress for days. There were times when I would drink for 4 days straight.
Yeah.
And it would be a situation of waking up in the morning. If I didn't have any, I'd go and get more. Even if I was staggering all over the road, I'd still go and get more. Then I drink until I pass out. Wake up. If I've got more, keep drinking. Can keep doing that for upwards of 3 to 4 days. And the weirdest thing that started happening to me was I started to have a lot of alcohol induced, I can't remember the term, sleep paralysis.
Mm-hmm.
And during those sessions of sleep paralysis, which to me felt like they lasted for hours, even though they were only a few minutes, you hallucinate. You start to have auditory and visual hallucinations. And on top of that, there were times when I'd be drinking so often that a few days later, I wouldn't be able to tell the difference between what happened in, say, a dream or what was reality. And the uncertainty it builds in you was part of what led me to the story I'm currently writing, because the story I'm writing right now is centered around uncertainty. And I think alcohol definitely builds that, at least for me, because it made me question a lot of the things that would happen to me or the things that I believed were happening at the time because I was drinking so much, so heavily. And so I think psychological thriller for me was definitely the way to go because I could, especially with my character being an alcoholic, because I could play with that, especially because his pain or his um the the journey he takes is based around something quite traumatic. And so I needed a way to make the things he sees, the things he experiences, seem questionable. And the easiest way for me to do that was to use the example I had in my own life, which would be alcohol. And he drinks heavily. And over the course of the story, it becomes difficult to differentiate between what's actually going on and what's part of his alcohol induced hysteria or whatever else you want to call it. And I felt that my experiences were, I had so many essentially, so I could just pour any part of it into what I'm trying to write. And that's where that came from. It's definitely, I'd say alcohol or alcoholism as I had it has definitely played a role in this particular story. I feel this is probably the darkest thing I'll write for a while, but I feel it needs to be written. The other thing I'm working on is actually a fantasy and it's a lot brighter in nature, but this I felt was necessary and
Mm.
I'm glad I'm writing it. It's difficult to write, but it's definitely, I'm having fun doing it. But I wouldn't call it fun, even though writing for me is fun, but it's an interesting it's an interesting story to put on paper,
Mm.
essentially.
How long have you been working on it?
I came up with the original idea around March in 2021. Um, the original concept was actually a graphic novel. A friend of mine, because I enjoy anime, and I just said to him, "Oh, do you want to make an anime?" Out of the blue, of course, while I was drinking, I just came up with this idea. Oh, let's make an anime. And he said, "All right, but we can't actually do that because we don't have the money. We haven't got anything to base it on, all sorts." And so he said, "Okay, manga then." And then from there, it just spiraled from the things we couldn't do into, okay, graphic novel.
Mm.
And so that was part of the reason why art became so important. I started to talk to so many artists, asking them, how much would this cost, for you to draw this for me or that for me? And it was lockdown. No one had any jobs and there was no money. So that wasn't really an option. So I was at my original form of creativity was writing. So I felt, okay, let me just do it in prose then. And so that's how I ended up writing it as a novella, because I realized that it wouldn't be as easy as I thought it was to create a graphic novel. So I actually started writing it properly around December last year, I think. And it has been up and down since then, obviously, with everything going on in the world. Hasn't been easy to focus, but I've been making, especially recently, more recently, when the alcohol has now shifted out of my life as much as possible. It has been I've been making a lot of progress on it. So I think, yeah, it's been a few months, about as long as I started doing videography, and about as long as yeah, I'd say pretty much everything for me in terms of acting, videography, and everything else really started taking off around December last year into this year, pretty much. But 2020 was the year I decided, okay, writing is the thing I wanted to do. I have ideas from back then that I started working on that I haven't completed. I will eventually get round to. That's the fantasy idea. I call that my work in progress number one because it was the original thing I was trying to do. This, the one that I'm working on currently, is actually my work in progress number two. So yeah.
Well, you know what? I've got a funny feeling there's going to be a three because it reminds me of when you said earlier about you being a child and having three books or a
Yeah.
few books around you when you're sleeping. And I'm just trying to imagine like your need to consume. What, like, we're all individuals. We've all got a brain that's ours, and a spirit that's ours, and a body that's ours. And I'm really interested to know what goes on in your head where you need to read 3 books. Like, what's going on in there where you're like, I'm reading this book, I'm reading this book, but yet you have the ability to consume the narrative from 3 of them. And as a youngster, you're inputting, and now you're at a point where you want, like, is there a balance where you still input and read a lot, and then you're creative? Right now you've got the 2 projects, so there's probably going to be a third.
Mm.
What's your brain like, Matthew? How can you describe it to us?
I'd say that my brain is difficult for me to understand, but I think when I was younger, I just enjoyed reading a lot, and I didn't watch much TV. I just preferred. I was always, if I'm at home, I'd be in a room, and I'd just be sitting there with. Oh, I used to get books free from my church, and I'd always want to be reading the next book, and it would annoy me that I'd have to finish this one book before I get to do that. So I ended up reading more than one at the same time. Somehow that still worked for me. I can't explain it, but I'd managed to keep each narrative in its own place while I was reading all 3. And I think that has translated into the way I write now, because even while I'm writing the current book, the only reason I'm actually only writing it physically by itself, I'm not doing anything else at the moment, even though there are other works in progress, um, is because I want to get that done as fast as possible. Because I was supposed to be, well, the plan is to have that published this year. By the end of the day, while I'm doing that, most of my art is for something else. Most of it, so I'm always thinking of the next project or the thing that I've always wanted to write, or something that, oh, that's a good idea. One thing I've started doing more recently is I'll come up with a new idea for a story. And because I know that this is going to drag my attention away from another one, because it's a lot more it's easier to read more books than it is to write several books, or 2 books and a screenplay. And so what I've decided to start doing, or what I've been doing rather, is when I come up with a new idea, I assess it on how big it would be as its own idea. And if I don't think it will be big enough to make sense for me to start writing that while I'm trying to do other things, I'll just collapse it into one of the things that already exists. So for me, while I'm writing one thing, the other thing is constantly updating. The work in progress #1 that I mentioned, the which was also supposed to be and will eventually be a graphic novel in and of itself, a series, that's always growing. It keeps changing things. It's like a world that I've built essentially. And I like building worlds. That's what is the most fun you can have writing fantasy. And so it evolves into a new thing. More characters come out of it. I will meet a new person, like them, see something about them that I find interesting, and suddenly that's a new character. And a whole plot will, develop out of me just seeing this person and interacting with them for any amount of time. That happened the other day, actually. I was on Twitter talking to, because I'm in the writing community on Twitter, and I was just talking to someone, and their look and the way they speak, and or rather the way they interact with people, it just captivated me to the point that I had to create a character based on them. So I asked permission, which I always do before I use a real human being. I will ask for permission, and they said yes. And I developed an entire storyline, a history for them, and it's all there. I've written a character sheet for them because to make things easier for myself, I separate all of my characters into little character sheets. So their history, their, how they look, what they're like, all of that. And I will keep it in what I call a character bank and wait for them to become relevant. A lot of these characters won't be relevant in that story for chapters upon chapters to come, but I don't know why I'm like that. I don't know how it works. I don't know why it works, but it just happens to be the way I enjoy writing. I can't focus on one thing without trying to create another one on the side. So I think I've found a balance in that now. If I don't think this idea will go anywhere on its own, I'll just collapse it into something else. I'll put it in an idea that's already there, especially something like fantasy, because with fantasy, if you're building a world and it's so large and there's so much going on in it, anything can happen. So you can have different arcs, you can have different areas. The world doesn't have to make any sense. I like to call that particular project a bizarre fantasy because it doesn't make any sense. Anything can happen in that world. So I collapse all of the ideas that I have no hope for into that. And that's pretty much how I maintain sanity, I think, is in just focusing on this one in terms of writing while also keeping others somewhere in my mind ready to work on whenever I want to. And that's pretty much how I figure that works.
Your mind kind of reminds me of your necklace. That, just ideas and
Yeah.
streams wrapping around each other. And I imagine you one day you're going to be the creator of the first endless novel where you're going to collapse all of your things into one stream of digital flow. I think
I hope
it'd
so.
be
I genuinely hope so because I mean, every story has to end, but I hope I make one that lasts possibly longer than I do because
yeah,
I would find that very interesting because it's like the world, things change and
yeah.
we are here for tiny amount of time, things keep going.
Mhm.
So I would enjoy that. But yeah, I think that world has a lot of potential and
Mhm.
it's big and it has hope. It has hope in it. So yeah.
What about hope for you? What
For
do you
me,
see? How do you feel about hope and Matthew's life, your life going forward?
well, I'd say that 2 years ago I was basically hopeless. And last year the ups and downs they're the same. That's how I felt anyway. And I've never felt as hopeful as I have in recent time before in my life. That much is a certainty. I think when I decided that creativity is what I wanted to do, that was when I suddenly started to feel like I could really succeed at something.
Yeah.
And I've never felt that before. I've never felt that I knew it about creativity, but I never understood it. It never occurred to me that, yes, I am hopeful for this. This is the thing I can do. This is what I'm going to do. And even if I don't reach enormous heights of success or whatever, this will at least keep me happy. And so I find that following this course that I've started with the writing, acting school, with the uh, videography, with everything else, networking, meeting new people, I have more hope than I've ever had in my life. And
Mm.
there's nothing could really, even though I still do have my downswings, there's nothing that can really take that away in a sense.
What
Which
does hope feel like?
hope feels to me like wanting to be here in essence is it's waking up in the morning and oh Jesus Christ. This is gonna be very cliche, but is waking up in the morning and realizing that there's something you can do that you enjoy doing and you want to do it and you don't hate what you're doing. And even though it's difficult and it is difficult, especially when if you're not born into wealth or something like that, you haven't got something to fall back on as easily. I have my degree, but it's always going to be a risk for me. But I don't mind. I think I think hope is acknowledging that you're taking a big risk and still going ahead with it. That's to me what hope almost by definition is still, yeah, I know this is going to be hard. I know this is going to be using the same word in a different way, difficult. I know that people are going to doubt my ability to do it. I know that at times I'm going to doubt my ability to do it, but I'm still going to do it. I never felt that for university. I never felt that for politics, education, or whatever. I always felt, okay, I'm going to do this thing, see what happens, and manage to eventually fail upwards. But with creativity, it's, yeah, risky. I don't mind. I'm still going to do it, even when I don't feel like doing it. I'll give myself a day and I'll get right back to it. And that's, I think, what hope is being able to continue doing something, even when it's the biggest risk you could ever take. And that's for me.
And what a beautiful way to end our 45 minutes, Matthew. I told you it would
Fly
fly
by.
by.
It
Fly.
did. It really did.
But you
Wow.
know what? I think you give me hope. Keep doing what you're doing, my friend. And
Thank you.
I really hope that we can meet each other face to face one day. Maybe we could, let's stay in touch. If anybody needs to get in touch with you, do you want to just send me a text and I'll put them in the
Yep.
Facebook feed, or you can just say now how, if you want anyone to get in touch with you, what they
Um,
need to do.
my email, but that might be a bit confusing to
Maybe
say
just your
over here.
Instagram or something.
Yeah, my
Just Insta.
Instagram. So my Instagram is Mlevare. So Mlevare, and that's what you can find me on. I post mostly my concept art on there. So if anyone wants to see that, and yeah, that's the easiest way, probably the easiest way to find me.
You're a good man,
Thank you.
and you're
You too.
inspirational, and your story and your art, your creations are going to inspire people. I have no doubt about it.
That's the hope.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank
I'm very happy to have had this conversation with you. It was it was very, and it flew by. You did
yeah,
tell
it's
me
been
that.
yeah, it's been beautiful. Thank you for joining me, Matthew, and thank you everybody at the Elephant and Castle community. Don't forget to join me on Thursday for a Tough Through Tender gathering. We'll see you all then. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Bye for now.
Bye.